Dear students, in a matter of 60 seconds, about the time it will take you to read this page, your body will perform millions of complex functions quietly, automatically, flawlessly. You will take about 15 breaths. Your heart will beat 70 times. Your tear ducts will moisten your eyes 25 times. 6 million chemical reactions will occur in your brain. Your bone marrow will produce 180 million blood cells and destroy the same amount. You will shed 10,000 skin cells, and 300 million cells will die. Just like that, over and over again throughout your lifetime, your body will work countless many miracles to keep you breathing, moving, thinking, living. Welcome to Human Anatomy and Physiology. Yours truly, Mr. Demetz. Okay, so in Human Anatomy and Physiology, you're going to see some things that, let me rephrase that. On this slideshow, you're going to see some things that I used when I taught this in my college class. So I'd always introduce myself this way. I'm not a doctor, so please don't refer to me as that. I'm not a professor, can't be referred as that. I don't like hey you. This is what I get sometimes after tests. That's not nice. I prefer Mr. Demetz, and that's the way you spell it. Yes, the M is capitalized. Okay, so in this class, we're going to look at structural and functional units of the human body. And so we'll also ask questions along the way. We'll learn a lot of interesting stuff and hopefully you'll like some of this. So I got a picture of a heart here on my screen. So the first question you're going to get in Human Anatomy and Physiology is this: which organ does the heart supply first? Now, if you're like me, I said, oh, it must be the brain. Branches off, goes straight to the brain. And unfortunately, I was wrong. Okay. So then my second one was, well, it must be the lungs. They're close. And that also is incorrect. So if you're thinking to yourself, it takes care of itself first, then you're right, it does. The heart feeds the heart first. So there's some interesting facts like that we find in Human Anatomy and Physiology. There's also some things that are like, meh, this is a meh one. They say that 10% of US adults are said to be alcoholic. That number's a little high if you ask me, but that's what the research says. Alcoholism destroys the liver. And when we study the liver, we learn that there is a structural and functional unit of the liver. It's called a lobule. And later we'll get into what those lobules do. Finally, we have a picture of the brain, and the structural and functional unit of the brain, by the way, is the neuron. If you think about the brains, the human brain, some of the cells in here have been with you longer than you've been alive. These were with you in the womb. That's amazing. So the human brain is 3 pounds. Cells have the capacity to study a universe that's a billion light years across. Unreal. It has the same capacity to create emotion. And we haven't ever known anything more, here's the question, have we ever known anything more complex than the human brain? So anyway, okay, so in this class, that's enough of this, the philosophical. In this class, you're going to be doing all sorts of things, most of which you're going to be doing together. Most of our assignments in this class are done together. Unfortunately, your tests will be done by yourself. But if you work with me and work with your group on the together projects and work by yourself on the test, you're going to do very well, and you're going to learn a lot of things in this class. In this class, we're going to use Elaine Marieb's book. She is universal. Her stuff is used in many high schools and colleges across the nation. Fantastic, fantastic resource. Another resource that I don't provide, but if you ever get the chance to picking a copy up, is the Human Anatomy coloring book. They also have a Human Physiology coloring book. I recommend both, but it's up to you. Okay. Sometimes we'll see things on my screen, my pictures, like my name, that we'll talk about in class. This is one of those pictures, and so I'm going to go right on past it. The terminology used in human anatomy and physiology is usually Latin or Greek. Ana is Greek for up, literally up. Timan, T-I-M-A-N, so like anatomy. Timan literally means to cut. So anatomy, the literal definition is to cut up or to dissect. Now, when it comes to the terminology, I promise if you take the time to look at the Greek or the Latin, things make more sense to you, okay? And if you take time to actually learn some of these prefixes and some of these roots, it really will help. Now, sometimes they're a little weird. Artery means air holder. That's because early anatomists thought that arteries only carried air because when they cut up the human body, that's what was inside the vessels. They didn't have the blood coursing through those, so they didn't understand. Sometimes, again, they're kind of interesting. Tachy, if you've ever heard of a tachometer in your car, a tachometer measures the speed of your engine. So tachy means fast. So sometimes we can take that and put it with something else we know. Cardia or cardia means heart. So if you hear the term tachycardia in human anatomy, you know this is a fast beating heart. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. Carotid, as in the carotid artery, means stupor or deep sleep. That's because early anatomists would actually hold someone's carotid artery closed and they would pass out or go into a deep sleep. Now, some of them are strange. Uterus means hysteria. So if you've ever heard of a hysterectomy, the word hysteria means excessively anxious. So clearly a strange term. But don't worry, women, because men get their chance too. The term penis literally means tail. Apparently the early anatomists were walking backwards. I don't know. So anyway, take time to look things up in this class, okay? Now, as far as techniques of study in this class, we're going to look at gross anatomy. And when we look at gross anatomy, these are things that we can see with the naked eye. And we're also going to look at microscopic anatomy. Those are things that you can't see with the naked eye. We study anatomy systemically, so a whole system, or we study anatomy in a regional. So systemic anatomy, if we were looking at the cardiac system per se, we'd look at the heart and all the vessels and everything that goes out from the cardiac system to cover the entire body. If we're looking at a regional area, we do this when we dissect. So we might look at an arm or a hand and we'll dissect everything that's in that hand. So that's regional anatomy. Just a couple ways to look at things. So in regional anatomy, you'll get, like the hand, obviously we get integumentaries with the skin. You get muscular underneath that. There's a lot of connective tissues in that. Eventually you get down to the skeletal system. There's cardiac in it as well. So regional anatomy is difficult to study sometimes. Now, when it comes to microscopic anatomy, and you're looking at things at the level of tissues, by the way, looking at tissues, this is called histology. If you're studying tissues, it's histology. If you're studying cells, it's cytology. So in our class, we're going to use light microscopy, and this will take us up to about 400x. If we had an electron microscope, that would take us up to about 30,000 times. The only problem with that is you have to deal with dead tissues. Now, if you want to study live tissues, you can use NMR's, nuclear magnetic resonance. That gives you bony tissue or skeleton. Now, if you have a functional NMR, FNMR, that shows structure and function. It can detect the movement of oxygen in the blood. So we can also look at positron emission tomography, PET scans. That's when areas of your body will light up. Those are kind of cool. So in certain situations, we can use radioactive materials that we can detect with our skin, with our machines. And say we use a radioactive glucose, we put you in the machine and we ask you to speak or to read, and you're going to see certain parts of your brain are lighting up. Okay, I'm off on a tangent. Let's go back. So, anatomy is the study of the body parts and the relationship to one another. We use gross or microscopic. We also can look at developmental. And I don't spend a lot of time in developmental in this class, but we'll still consider some developmental. Now, this is class as anatomy and physiology. So physiology is the study of the function of the body's structural machinery. When it comes to physiology, we consider the operations of specific organs. So in cardiovascular, obviously, we look at the operations of the heart and the blood and how we move the blood through the system. That's the physiology. But when we look at muscular, we look all the way down to the fibers and how those fibers contract and interact with one another. That's the physiology, okay? So it's kind of important in physiology that we have an idea that we can explain electrical currents for like nerves, pressures for like blood pressure, and then of course always mechanical because the way we use our bones and our muscles. That's important to know that. Before we get started, let's take a look at these two pictures of lungs. When we look at tissues and study histology, sometimes we make judgment calls. So we look at the picture on the left and go, wow, that is a healthy lung and heart. The nice colors of those. And we look at the lung on the right and go, wow, that is not a healthy lung. But sometimes we got to step back and go, you know, both of those are on the wrong side of the body. Neither one of those are healthy. So let's move on. Okay. The levels of structural organization. This is a chart. We always start with number 1 up here. We start with our chemical levels. So we have atoms combined to form molecules, and then those molecules come together to form different macromolecules, which then, like proteins, which form organelles, and then organelles come together to form cells. So we're going this way. So now we've gone from chemical into the cellular side. From the cellular, cells are made of molecules, of course. Then we can move into tissues. So tissues then consists of similar types of cells. Now there's all types of tissues, and I'm going to look real quick. I think I've got my next slides going to the tissues. Yeah. So we've got all different types of tissues, and we're going to spend a very long time looking at these. Matter of fact, we're going to have a whole unit of it, but we'll get there. So anyway, tissues then come together. If you have different types of tissues, they come together to form an organ. And then organs come together to form organ systems that work closely together. And finally, organ systems make up us organisms. Okay, I'm going to stop there with this video because I think it's long enough.